Hi there everyone. I had a lovely time last year. We had a get together with all the girls I was at school with in my secondary school. And although I'm not a fan of Facebook particularly, it was through a Facebook page that I got in touch with a lot of my friends again. And 13 of us gathered, and it was just memory lane and do you remember this and do you remember the other. So it puts me in mind of this word remember. Remember is always something to do with looking back. You can't remember into the future. But also sometimes it's something that we've forgotten and we recall it, it comes to mind and, oh, I've remembered. So for quite a long time I used to think, well, why on earth did God say about Moses and the children of Israel that God remembered them? Had he forgotten them? Did he have a moment when he suddenly thought, oh my goodness me, they've been in Egypt for 400 years and oh, I've forgotten them, I better do something about it. Well, not at all. Remember has a different or a wider meaning when God remembers something. It's a covenant word, and when two people, or God and his people, there's a covenant, remembering means that the person steps in and acts. So if one partner needs help, he can call out and he says, come and help me, intervene, come and help and act in my situation, step in, do something. And that's what God is saying to Moses. He says, I've heard your groaning, I've heard your cries, and I have remembered my covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their descendants, and I'm intervening to act on your behalf. And as we know, God stepped in into their situation in a mighty way. Abraham, earlier on actually, Abraham was in covenant with God, and Lot, his nephew, got himself into a bit of a pickle down in the city of Sodom, which was very, very sinful. And Abraham pleaded with God for him to rescue Lot. And it says that God says, I've remembered my covenant and I've remembered Abraham. He didn't say, I've remembered Lot. He said, I've remembered Abraham. And so God stepped into that situation. If you remember, Hannah was desperately trying to have a baby and all the disappointment that comes with that. And eventually she went into the temple and she cried out to God. She said, remember me. And of course, God did remember her, and her son, if you can remember, was Samuel. Mary, scrolling on many, many centuries now, when she arrived at Elizabeth's house, she knew she was going to have the Messiah, but maybe she didn't know she was pregnant yet. But Elizabeth recognizes that the Messiah is in her. And then Mary just praises God and said, he's remembering his covenant love to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised his ancestors. What an amazing prayer from probably a little girl that was maybe 14, maybe not much older. And as we know, through that pregnancy, God was stepping in on behalf of his people and the rest of the world once again. Zechariah, who was John's father, on the day of John's circumcision, he was unmuted. That's a modern word, isn't it? Unmuted, but he'd been made mute out of unbelief, really. And he was so thrilled about John. He just says, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he's come to redeem his people and to show his covenant love to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham. So after 400 years of silence, God had stepped in again. Interesting, the 400 years of silence, isn't it? Through Jesus, we're in a new covenant with God, and we too can say, remember me, and he will act. But of course, as we know, if we know scripture at all, answer doesn't always come straight away. We've talked about the 400 years already. Hannah, actually, her answer came pretty soon. But God's timing is perfect, and waiting always involves faith. And he likes faith. I mean, faith pleases God. Many of the psalmists call out to God to remember them, and we can do the same. I've got a bit of personal testimony here. I was getting a little bit, in my late 20s, I was getting a bit lonely on the shelf. And lots of my Christian friends were getting married and having babies and things. And it's not good for man or woman to be alone. And I cried out to the Lord, and Lord, remember me. And he stepped in. Children, after years of disappointment, monthly tears, trying to be pleased for others when they were pregnant, specialists telling us we were very unlikely to have children, we cried out and said, Lord, you said we're to be fruitful, remember us. And God stepped in, and we had 3 daughters in 3 years. So where do you need God to step in and answer? And I'm going to pray, but what I've done is I've been praying about possible situations, and I'm going to speak them out. And at the end of that, if we can join in and say, Lord, remember me. Family illness, maybe your own health, grieving, money worries, desire for marriage, desire for a baby, heartbreak in a relationship, loneliness, fear of dying, family members who are estranged, family members not yet Christians, marriage disappointments, unemployment. For these and all our concerns, we cry out to you, Lord, and say, remember me and step into my situation. Amen. Have a good day.